Um, I want to ask a question. You see a lot of things listed on the screen, right? There is all the way from major things like Alzheimer's and heart disease and diabetes to things that may not be considered life-threatening but are still painful. Acne, mood swings, cravings, fatigue, you feel tired through the day. And if I were to ask you, there is something that's common to all these things. What do you think that would be? Weight? Yeah.
What we eat.
What we eat? Yeah. Stress. I mean, all true. But if I were to tell you one quantitative thing, because stress is hard to quantify, right?
Indiscipline.
Even that's hard to quantify. We all know we are indisciplined, but it's hard to quantify. But if I were to tell you there's one common theme behind all of this, it is our blood sugar levels. Okay? Many of us, people, especially people who are diabetic, they prick your finger, right? And there's a drop of blood comes and then you look at your blood sugar measurement. If you look at your annual health checkup, there's always a fasting blood glucose levels. So we all have this number. If you were to look in your reports, you'll find it. Okay? But that's a single number. Then there's a more advanced number. It's called HbA1c. Some of you may have seen that number in your reports. And when that number is high, you're said to be diabetic. Okay? So this blood sugar shows up in various ways. But most of them are a single point in time measurement, which means you'll do your annual blood checkup. During that checkup, they'll take your blood. They will tell you at that moment in time what's your blood glucose level. But actually, that's not very useful. I mean, it's okay if there's nothing else. But what is the common cause behind all of these things is our blood sugar levels throughout the day. Okay? It doesn't remain the same. It moves up and down. And this is a sort of a view of the blood sugar level. On the x-axis is time, right? It's about 4 or 5 hours. And the y-axis is our blood glucose levels. Ideally, you want to be in the dark green zone. If you're in the dark green zone, your blood glucose is staying in the right zone. If it goes higher, it's not a great thing. If it stays high for too long, that's really bad. So you need to know your blood glucose levels at all time now, and I'll explain how all of this works. But the goal is stay in the dark green zone, don't go above it. Okay? And what determines blood glucose? All the things that were spoken about. And they're all lifestyle. Okay? The food we eat changes our blood glucose levels. The exercise we do changes our blood glucose levels. The stress we face changes our blood glucose levels. The way we sleep, some days you wake up like, I didn't sleep very well. It is going to change your blood glucose levels. Okay? So the first point is, if you can manage your blood glucose levels throughout the day, you can actually impact all these things. And I'm going to show you lots of data. This is not meant to be my opinion. I'm going to show you a lot of data that has shown that this is true. Okay. Then the next question is, okay, so blood glucose levels have to be kept under control. But the question is, why? I mean, we know why, but what or how does it affect us? So I'm going to give you a 3-minute education on how our bodies work. It is not meant to be a medical education because that becomes too complicated. It is meant to be a very simple picture that I want you to keep in mind, because if you understand a simple picture, you will be able to start understanding exactly what causes what in your body. Okay, so any food you eat, okay, at the end of the day, all the food we eat at a very high level is made up of fat, protein, fiber, and carbs. Okay? You all heard these terms, and all the food we eat is a combination of these 3-4 things. Okay? Now, of all these 4, which is the one that you always heard as an issue? Carbs. Okay? Now, if you went back 30 years, what was the most vilified thing? Fats. Okay? So there is we'll talk about why all that is the case. But today, carbs is the bad guy. Right? Everyone always told, don't lose weight, stop your carbs. That's a magic formula. And if it was that easy, it would be great. It's not. Okay? But why carbs? Why is carbs the villain? carbs are a villain because inside our body, this is what happens. When you eat food, and let's say it's heavy in carbs, yeah, your food enters your mouth, stomach, goes into your small intestine. Okay? When that food enters the small intestine, there is an enzyme, and I'm not going to get into all technical things. There is an enzyme that breaks down that carbs into glucose molecules, because carbs means what? Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is glucose. Okay? So that enzyme takes this food that you've just eaten, breaks it down into glucose molecules. Okay? Then this glucose molecules goes from your small intestine into your bloodstream. Okay? And that's when it is called blood glucose. And so when you prick your finger, that measurement you get, it's of the amount of glucose that's floating around in your bloodstream. Okay? Now, what is this glucose supposed to do? When you eat carbs, the carbs have a role to play in our lives. When they go in and get broken down into glucose, they go and they enter the 1 trillion cells in your body. Right? Our body is made of over 1 trillion cells. Okay? These cells require energy to work. Right? Your cells are doing all the work to keep you alive, to make your heart beat, to make your brain think. The cells need energy. Well, where is that energy coming from? From all this glucose. Okay? So it's all good. So what happens is the moment the glucose molecules enter your bloodstream, insulin, you've all heard of insulin? Insulin is released. Insulin is released the moment it sees glucose in your bloodstream. And what is the job of insulin? The job of insulin is to open all these trillion cells and take this glucose and put it into the cell. Okay? So now the cells have the energy, they'll do the work. Okay? Great. All this is very good. Now, if you've had a lot of glucose, a lot of carbs, whatever you put into the cells, there is still extra left in the bloodstream. Now what to do? So the insulin says, okay, I got extra glucose, I need to do something with it. So then it goes and puts it into your liver. It stores it in your liver. But your liver has limited storage. So then if there is still extra, let's say, then what does it do? It goes and puts it in your muscles. Okay, it stores it in your muscles. But even your muscles have limited storage. Then what does it do? If there is still extra, then it starts storing it as fat cells in your body. And fat cells, there is no limit. It will keep dumping it. Okay? And in your blood report, if you ever see a term called triglycerides, that's basically the amount of extra glucose that's saved as fat cells in your fat cells. Okay? Now, this is also okay because few hours later, now it's late in the evening, night time, all the glucose you put into your cells, they've been used up. Now your cells require more glucose. So what will the body do? It will take it from the liver, because remember, that's a storage. It will take it from the liver and put it into the cells. And if that gets used up, it will take it from the muscles it will use to run your muscles, right? So you exercise, your muscles need it. Okay? And so if in the night time when you have nothing to eat, you can use this stored stuff. Now, however, if you even in the night, tell I want to sorrow on something, I want to quickly have a quick midnight snack. Okay, what happens? Now your body does not need to go to the storage. You have just put more glucose into your bloodstream, so it uses that. So there is no need to go into the storage of fat or of liver or anything else. And so your storage keeps building up higher, higher, higher. Over time, your triglycerides go up, your cholesterol goes up, and bad things happen. Right? Now, I still haven't explained why is so that will explain why we put on weight if we have too many carbs. But it doesn't explain why those other things that I showed also happen. When you have a glucose spike, right? When you have a lot of carbs or a lot of sugar, you had a whole bowl of Shrikhanda without anything else. Huge spike. Okay? Whenever you have a huge spike, your cells go crazy. They don't know how to deal with so much stuff being put in, and it causes a lot of issues. There's a thing called free radicals, which can go and cause mutation that causes cancer. Okay, there's oxidative stress. I mean, there are all these very technical sounding things, but the bottom line is all of them happen when you have these big glucose spikes. Okay, so if you could find a way to keep the glucose spike low, you will save yourself not just weight issues, but all this cancer and dementia and Alzheimer's and all of that. And there's a lot of literature now that has shown that that is what has to be addressed. Okay. Now, how does all this, why does all this matter apart from just theory, right? So, so our goal is minimize the intensity and spikes of our spike. Now, here's a quiz. Okay. I'm going to show you a question and I want you to guess what the answer is, because now we're trying to reduce spikes, right? And we said food causes spikes. So we need to know which foods cause a spike and which don't. So if I told you between eating raw mango and ripe mango, is there a difference in terms of what it will do to your body in terms of spikes? Any guesses? Which is worse? Is it equal? Any guess?
We heard raw mango, any raw fruit is always good instead of cutting and eating it. That's what we only know.
Correct. Absolutely. Now, let's see what the data says, right? Because we actually had hundreds of people do this so that we know. Now, of course, there is a genetic component. Okay, it's not like genes don't play a role. They do play a role, but we often blame everything on our genes. But the issue is most of the time it's not the genes. Okay? And what you heard is correct, right? Look at the top. When you eat ripe mango, there's a much bigger spike. Okay, because when the thing when it goes from raw to ripe, what's happening? Sugar is getting formed, right? So it makes sense, right? So intuitively, this makes sense. If you have a choice, of course, ripe mango is ripe mango, it tastes good, but it's not like give it up, but at least you will be aware, right? Next one. You want to add sugar, white sugar, or jaggery? Right? Let's see. Not true. This, I mean, at the end of the day, now let's go back to that map we created, right? Our body doesn't care what you call natural sugar, artificial sugar. If it's sugar, it means it's made up of glucose molecules. If it's made up of glucose molecules, once it enters your body, it does the same damage, right? But very often, and we have heard, see, that earlier one was true. And if that's true, we assume everything we have heard is true. And then data tells us it's not true, right? So, good to know, right? Next one. Okay. Short grain rice, long grain rice. Does it matter? Doesn't matter. Well, it does. Okay. And, you know, actually, Sneha, who's a clinical dietitian, can even explain later on. I'm not going to get into the details now so that we can keep moving. We have a long Q&A session. We can answer a lot of questions because by the end of it, I bet you'll have a lot of questions. But it does. And there is a reason for it and all that, right? Bottom line is, do not trust your instinct or what you've heard. Okay? You have to actually see data to know what's happening in our body. And then, does everyone have the same reaction to the same foods? And the answer is no, right? Now, they will have similar reaction, but not the same. Because this is where the genes do play a role. They play a 20-30% role. They don't play a 100% role, but they don't play a 0% role, right? And so two different people have pohe. Pohe has a lot of carbs, so it's going to cause a spike. The only question is how much. If you're lucky and you're from a good gene pool, not as much. If you're not, then it does. Okay? So now I want to tell you why I got into this space. Right? I'm not a medical doctor. Okay? I'm a PhD, which has nothing to do with it. In my PhD in computer science and electrical engineering, so nothing to do with this. However, about 10 years back, my wife heard an ad on the radio, and that ad was, South Asians have a high propensity for heart disease and diabetes. India is the heart disease capital of the world, right? 60% of all the heart disease patients in the world live in India. Okay? So it's a huge number. So the ad she heard was South Asians have a big issue. So once you turn 40, you should get yourself tested. So she told me about it. I said, no. It doesn't apply to people like me. And look at me, I'm fine, right? But as those of you who are married know, a recommendation from a spouse is not really a recommendation. And so I soon found myself at the South Asian Art Center, entering an appointment and thinking to myself, what a complete waste of time. I went in, they looked at me and they said, yeah, we'll do all the tests, but you seem to be one of the lucky ones, right? And just as this thing, just one more time. I looked at, so these are my blood test results, okay, when I went in for this. You see, most of them, cholesterol, LDL was all in the green. The only that was in the red was triglycerides, but, not a big deal. Even the doctor told me, the other doctor, not the South Asian Art Center, the other doctor told me, yeah, it's okay, take care of your health, and by next time it will be better. Okay. Now, you notice my weight, I'm 6 feet tall. This is 72 kgs is not considered overweight. Okay. So weight was not the issue, none of that. So I'm like, fine. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't even drink tea or coffee. Okay. I never did. So I don't think any of this applies to me. They told me they'll get back to me in 3 days with the results. The same night they got back to me and they said, please come in as soon as you can because you have been diagnosed with heart disease. Okay. And not only were you diagnosed with heart disease, I was at the 98th percentile of calcification of my arteries. And the exact words used by the cardiologist was, you are a walking time bomb. You are the type of person we read about in the newspaper. You go out, and I'm a competitive soccer player. You go out, play soccer, come back home in the night, you're gone. I mean, imagine when you're 40, hearing that is shocking to say the least. And so I was like, I don't even know what, I was first shocked. And then I said, I don't know what caused it, right? Because I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. And they looked at all the foods because they asked me to fill out a log of all the foods I ate. And when they looked at it, they pointed to something and said, see, this is a major issue. And what they pointed to was what I thought, based on what I'd heard, was amazing for me. And they told me that was the worst thing I was doing for myself. And that was, I was drinking fresh squeezed orange juice. Okay? I thought fresh squeezed orange juice is great, right? Don't have Thumbs Up, don't have Pepsi, don't have Coke, have fresh squeezed orange juice. But back to the same jaggery logic, right? Fresh squeezed orange juice is still sugar, right? So it is a problem. You want to eat 3 oranges, eat 3 oranges, but don't drink 3 oranges worth of orange juice. So now let's go back to that model, okay, that I was telling you earlier. Why is this a problem? And I'll tell you now. Remember when I told you when you eat carbs, that enzyme breaks down the thing into glucose and it enters your bloodstream? When you have an orange, when you eat an orange, okay, the fiber, there's fiber, a lot of fiber in that orange. What fiber does, there's fiber in lots of things, but in that orange there is fiber. What fiber does is it enters the blood, it enters the small intestine, and that enzyme, which breaks down stuff, it stops that enzyme from working as well. So now, if I eat carbs or sugar, it gets broken into glucose molecules at a slower pace. The second thing fiber does is it creates like a mesh between the small intestine and the bloodstream. So now that whatever glucose molecules have been converted, it moves into the bloodstream slower. It's like a drip system instead of just rushing in. So when you have an orange, when you eat an orange, the fiber is helping slow down the conversion of carbs to glucose. When you drink orange juice, most of the time you squeeze out all the fiber, right? And all of that gets kept behind. So there is no fiber to help you. That glucose straight hits your bloodstream, you see a big spike. So now I'm thinking to myself, what else am I doing that's so wrong, right? But I was so scared that time that I stopped eating carbs dramatically. I had to reduce all the sugar, all the stuff I loved, I just gave up. And yeah, can you go to the next thing? This is my result 3 months later. These 3 months I went on an intense diet. Okay? And you can see everything improved. Okay? But it was a pretty miserable existence. Because I couldn't eat anything I liked. And that's not sustainable, right? I mean, if someone told you for the rest of your life, you want to live a long life, give up all the things you love. By giving up all the things you love, it will feel like a very long life. You don't enjoy any day, right? But I want to point out one interesting thing. When I was told to do this intense diet, I was told you have to lose weight. And nobody in my life ever told me I should lose weight. They told me put on weight. And here was somebody telling me you need to lose weight. So I asked the cardiologist, okay, I'll do all of this stuff, but I don't think I'll ever be able to lose weight. And the cardiologist said, don't worry. If you cut down on your sugar spikes, you'll automatically lose weight. And I said, I don't understand. Because that time, that whole logic I explained, I did not know. But you notice, I lost from 72 kgs, 8 kgs, which for me was a big percentage. But if someone saw me, they would not be able to tell the difference. Because you look at another metric. You see this thing called visceral fat. Okay. That went on it's a relative scale. It went from 9 to 4. So what ends up happening is, very often there are people who have a lot of weight which is subcutaneous. It's under your skin. That fat actually is not dangerous from a health perspective. Okay. But when you have a lot of sugar spikes, remember I told you it's always storing stuff. Where is it storing? It's storing around your organs. Okay. Around your liver and all of that. That's actually very dangerous fat because that puts a lot of pressure on your heart. Okay. And so very often you might have been told, measure your waist circumference. Why do you measure a waist circumference? Because that's sort of like a proxy for visceral fat. Okay. So a larger your waist circumference, the higher amount of fat that is probably stored. Now there are more direct measurements, but if you don't have a more advanced scale, just look at your waist circumference and it's a good, relatively good indicator. Okay. Now, this is when I said, okay, great. I'm glad that all my markers have come down. And by the way, heart disease, this calcification of your arteries is irreversible. So that I can't reverse. All I can do is ensure I don't keep adding more calcification, which gets added because of the sugar spikes. So I slowed down my sugar spikes. But I said, I don't want to not eat all the foods I love. So I had to find a plan on how to do that. And so I put on being trained to look at data. I put on every possible sensor I could. Apple Watch, Fitbit, Whoop Band, Aura Ring, heart rate monitor, blood pressure monitor, continuous glucose monitor. At any given time, I had every sensor on. And I would track all the foods I ate and all the exercise I did. I have so much data that anybody loves data, please come meet me. Right? And I started finding correlations. And one of the most interesting things I found was this thing that I showed you earlier. How different foods, how different exercises, weight training versus cardio. Within cardio, running versus playing soccer. How each of these things were sort of being processed by our body very differently. But that was only step one, right? Step two is, how do I still eat the foods I love? Because that's really what I wanted to answer. Okay? And so over the next 8 years, I continuously tracked my data and I did all these interesting experiments. Like I would eat ice cream for research purposes. And then I would look at how much of a spike it caused. And then I would eat different combinations before the ice cream. Again, remember I spoke about how fiber plays a role. So I ate, some veggies. And then I ate the ice cream. Okay. Suddenly the glucose spike became lower. Now we know why. That time I didn't know why it was happening. So I would look at these things, then go get my cardiologist, my endocrinologist, everybody together, sit around the table and I would ask them, explain to me why this caused this. And they would tell me, because I was not diabetic. I had heart disease, but I was not diabetic. There's a lot of data on diabetics. There isn't too much data on relatively healthy people. And so they said, you know what, we have studied all of this in school theoretically, but we have never had practical data. So now I showed them all this data and they were like getting excited. So I did this. And if you now look at this last month, okay. This is my data last month. So 8 years later, now I've been tracking it every year, but 8 years later, you see the numbers are pretty much the same. Nothing has changed dramatically. Okay? But now I actually eat jilbis and gulab jamun and ice cream and shrikhand, and I just know how to do it smartly. Okay? How do you move things around? And I'm going to show you examples of how that came about, right? So, for example, if I want to eat ice cream, I now know what I should eat before it, so that I can eat the ice cream. Okay, and before typically it is a combination of veggies, okay, because veggies are a good source of fiber. Then some source of protein, paneer if you're vegetarian, or any meat typically has a lot of protein if you're non-vegetarian, cheese, and then some fat. And there is good fat, there is bad fat, and all of that, right? I built this whole database of what works for me. Okay. This full screen. You go to full screen.
Presentation.
Okay. Okay, so so I wanted, like, in order to come up with this, there were three things that I cared about, right? One is I didn't want people to tell me, oh, you should do this, because I don't know whether it's true or not. Right? So it had to be personalized. To make it personalized, I put all these sensors on, so it's telling me objective data. Right? It might not work for someone else, but it definitely works for me. And if it has to work for you, you should put on the sensor. Right? Scientific, because I saw data that showed that eating the fiber helped, unless there's a good scientific explanation, it might just have been a sensor error, right? How do I know? So some doctor has to provide a scientific explanation of why something will help, and finally sustainable. Because for anything to really work in the long term, it better be sustainable. Otherwise, you do it for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then you give up. And if I were to do a poll, and everywhere I've done a poll, the number of people who have tried something, some diet plan, and then given up is pretty much almost everybody, unless you happen to be lucky and you don't have any issues. And so, with that in mind, for the personalized sensor part, I use there's a sensor you can buy. It's from Abbott. It's called Libre Freestyle. It's a continuous glucose monitor, and what it does is you see this circular thing over here on the screen. It's small thing. That's the sensor. Okay. It's an FDA approved device. They make it, they sell it. You can buy it on Amazon. Yeah. You put it on yourself. You don't require anybody else to put it. You can put it on yourself. It's like a 15-second thing. Just put it on. There's a small filament. It goes into your interstitial skin fluid. It does not go all the way into your bloodstream. So it's not like you don't even feel it. Okay? It stays there for 2 weeks. And what it does is it measures the blood sugar level in this interstitial fluid. So whatever is happening in your blood, a few minutes later shows up in the interstitial fluid. So that's what it measures from. And I created an app for myself so that I can use the app to get the data from the sensor into my device. Okay. That same app also has I use it to track all the food I ate, all the exercise I do. So in one place in my app, I have the inputs, which is the food I ate, the exercise I did, and what it did to my blood sugar level. Okay. So that's the first thing, right? Then, okay. So here I want to ask a few questions, right? Just so that we can start thinking how to become self-sufficient. So I remember I told you this model, okay, of how our body works. Now, why is it better? So I can tell you that it is better to have a dessert as a snack. Why is it better to have something sweet as a dessert rather than as a snack? Okay, because when you have it as a snack, you are eating the sugar straight. When you're having it after dinner or after lunch, you're typically in your lunch, hopefully having enough fiber and fat and protein. And so if you ate the same thing, the exact same thing as by itself versus after a meal, you will find a big difference. And typically, if you think about it, when are we the most indisciplined? It's typically between meals, right? You walk by, you just pick up something, you put in your mouth, and then afterwards you regret it, or something you don't even regret it. Till the annual blood test results come, then we all regret it for 1 week.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I don't remember what the other. Okay, I'll come up with one. So if I were to ask you, resistance training or weight training versus cardio. Okay. Weight training. So cardio is very good for a lot of reasons, but not for stuff like weight loss and any of that. Because when you're doing cardio, you require energy at a rapid pace, right? Your body requires energy at a very rapid pace. Where is it going to get it at a rapid pace? It gets it from your liver. Okay? When you're doing weight training, you don't, like your heart rate is not going up too high. So that time it can take from your muscles. Remember I said it's stored in your muscles. That time the muscle use up whatever is there and then the muscles pick more from the blood. So it reduces the amount of blood, glucose in your bloodstream. So if you want to lose weight, go for a walk. Don't go for a run. If you want to get a healthier heart from a ability for it to be stronger, go for a run. But it's important to know what helps what. Otherwise, we say, I'm out to lose weight, I'm going to go for a run. And then you find it's not very effective. But now you know why. Okay? The other thing that weight training does is it builds up your muscle cells, right? There are more muscle cells. And more muscle cells means more storage for the glucose. So it takes the glucose out of the bloodstream at a faster rate because there are more muscles to feed or to store, right? And so, again, if you want to reduce your blood glucose spikes, do weight training. Okay? If you want to get ready for a marathon, you want to, do that type of stuff. So both have their areas of this, right? How do blood sugar levels affect our sleep? So some days you might notice you don't sleep well, and you don't know why. Okay? Because it's like, I don't know, some days I sleep well, some days I don't get good sleep. And you will find, and especially because there's a lot of data again, that if you ever have something, if you have a sugar spike, because let's say you had a big dessert without having enough protein and fiber, when you have a big spike, it actually keeps you up at night because it's almost like you're at a heightened state of awareness. But the problem is it's also true the other extreme. If your blood sugar levels go very low, let's say you have not eaten for a long time, or you had no carbs in your meal, that causes your blood sugar levels to go very low. And remember that the green zone was there. If you go below the green zone, also it's a problem because your body thinks there is going to be no energy to keep it alive. So it keeps waking you up in the night to try and get you to eat something. Right? So again, it affects our sleep if it goes too high or too low. You have to keep it in that green zone as much as possible. So one interesting thing, if you go for a run, you might see that your blood glucose goes down, which seems to make sense. But if you play soccer, if you play tennis, if you play any sport like that, you find your blood sugar actually goes up heavily, which is actually like strange, right? Like you're exercising. But that's because sports like tennis and soccer are start and stop sports. Right? You run, then suddenly you're walking. Again, you run, then you walk. And so your body has no idea when you're going to need it. So your liver keeps pumping more glucose into your bloodstream. Now, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. If these spikes are coming because of a sport, the net is good. But you can't just look at the data and say, I know what it means. There is also context. And that's why, I know there are companies now that are doing a lot of this, but they expect you to figure it out. And so I'll give an example. If you drink scotch, you will see no spike. If you drink beer, you'll see a big spike because scotch doesn't, right? Now, I'm not recommending that. Because there are a lot of other issues with drinking with alcohol, right? But if I just went with data, I should say, let me drink a lot of scotch and let me stop playing tennis, right? But that's not the conclusion. And then the last part I said was sustainability. And there what I realized is, most of us even know certain things we should do. Like most of us know going for a walk after a meal is a good thing. We might know it, but we still don't do it, right? And so how do you make something into a habit? So what I did is I created a simple way to build a habit. Because if I said to myself, I'm going to walk for 15 minutes after every meal, I know I'm not going to do it more than a couple of weeks. Because 15 minutes is a big commitment. But if I said, I'm going to walk 2 minutes a day after every meal, 2 minutes, even if I don't do anything, I just walk to the outside, come back, I'll get my 2 minutes. And so what I realized through the process is, don't set these ambitious goals. Set very easy goals to achieve. Get into the habit of doing that 2 minute walk. And you will find that after a month, you'll say, I'm out for 2 minutes, I might as well do 3. And over a 3-month period, you will find amazingly that you are actually gone up to the 10-minute mark, and you start building interesting things. Like in my case, I live in the US. I have to find I want to talk to my family, right? So I said, okay, this 10 minutes I'll talk. In some other people's case, it can be something else. I can listen to a podcast. There are ways you can find to actually make it fun. Because if it's not fun, you're not going to do it, right? So you can go through this, all of them. And the other thing I would say is, if I were to ask you, do you remember what your LDL levels are? LDL is very highly correlated to heart disease. By the way, 80% of people who had a heart attack, their blood results were perfectly fine. Okay. Now, if I were to ask you, what were your LDL levels? LDL is shown to be correlated to heart attack. Does anyone know their numbers? I would be very surprised if too many people did. No, but what is it exactly? It should be below 125. Yeah, so you're right. But 124 is below 125 and 75. And the problem is, most of the blood test results, if you look at your reports, you only pay attention to any marker that is underlined. Correct? If it's not underlined, it's fine. But for example, cholesterol, the threshold is 200. There is no magical thing about 200. In fact, the number 200 was based on a study of Caucasian males in 1955. It does not apply to Indians. But we all happily use 200. And if we are 199, it will not be underlined and we are very happy. And if it's 201, we will panic. Okay, at least for a week. Okay? And so the thing is, it's more important to look at the trend, right? If something is moving and our body is giving us enough signals, and these blood tests are giving us enough signals, it's a question of, are we looking at them carefully? If we are, we will stop a lot of these things way earlier, right? And so now, with all of this, you can actually, in fact, for those interested, we'll go to the next one. So wheat roti versus multigrain roti. Multigrain roti typically wins because, again, more fiber in it, right? Next one, I spoke about this. Right. So, somebody who's doing workouts, remember I said that muscle mass increases, so more storage. So when they eat, when that same person eats the same food 3 months apart, first time they were not exercising and 3 months later they built up muscle mass, you will find that the same foods cause a lower glucose spike. carb heavy meals. Okay, so pasta is carbs, right? Pasta is a big spice. But, and this is not my favorite thing to do, but if you have to, something like apple cider vinegar, okay, 1 tablespoon in water, it acts like a fiber. So it reduces the glucose spike. I mean, there are lots of things. I'm just giving you lots of examples, but you can keep experimenting with different things. And then for me, this was very important, right? Desserts don't have to be an issue. Here you see lots of examples, lots of research was done. So strawberry ice cream, but if I eat a salad or veggies, then strawberry ice cream, you see huge difference, right? Now you don't have to feel guilty about eating ice cream. Now don't go overboard, but you can eat, right? Banana milkshake versus banana walnut smoothie with date. Again, you add more interesting sources of protein and fiber. It does help. Kit Kat, thick shake, dark chocolate. So interesting thing. You know, over here, how many people like dark chocolate versus dark chocolate? Very few. Right? Milk chocolate. I assume more people. Wow, this is a pretty healthy one. So, but dark chocolate is much better from a glucose spike point of view than milk chocolate. Yeah. And there's a Instagram account called Glucose Gyan. Yeah. There are lots of such examples that you can look at and see what it means. And one of the first things we did, right, is we said, let's try this out on doctors. Because doctors, I found, are typically the most skeptical. Yeah. And some of them are the first to admit it also. They will say, look, you know, we are, first of all, they are very busy. They have enough people, enough patients. Yeah? They don't have time to think about preventive. There's treatment takes up all their time. So I said, if doctors experience it, I don't want doctors saying, oh, it's good without experiencing. I want doctors to experience it. So we've had 15, 20 doctors, cardiologists, name the specialty, and we have had doctors do this. And down to the last one, they all talk about how they had aha moments, about how it changed their thing. And they joined the program because they were either pre-diabetic or they were concerned about family history or whatever. And so we first had doctors do it. And when enough doctors said that this is really working well and it's so easy to follow, then we started deploying this. And now about 600 people have gone through this program. There's a whole commercial program. I don't want to talk about the commercial aspect because I'm not here to pitch anything. I want to make this an awareness talk. So you guys all know what are the things you can do. They are very small, right? Very small changes that you can make without signing up for anything. If you want to, then we can always provide more details. But there is enough and more. Okay, good. And then just keep going. So here, let me show this, right? So here are examples. These 500-600 people have gone through it. They have sent us what they tried. So for example, this person on 2 consecutive days. So the top graph, they ate 2 bread slices, half an avocado, 2 egg whites, no yolk, with salt and seasoning. That was the top graph. And you can see there's a spike. Okay. Next day, he ate the same thing, and the only difference was he added a teaspoon of almond butter. Ate the exact same thing, but added a teaspoon of almond butter. And you can see a spike is gone. Now, if you were told you can eat all the things you were eating earlier, but just add almond butter. Now, in this person's case, he added almond butter. We didn't tell him add it, but he now knows he has to add some form of protein and fiber. So he chose almond butter. You choose what you want. Okay? And you see the spike is gone. Again, here, a different person, they ate chole, khichdi, and broccoli. First graph, you see a big spike. Second one is gone. And what they changed was, they said they reduced the chole and khichdi from 1 cup to 3/4 cup. Okay? And increased the broccoli from 1 cup to 2 cups. So the portions changed. They added olive oil on the broccoli, partially for the taste, but partially olive oil is good. And ate the broccoli first because again that's the fibers, right? That slows down that enzyme. And you can see the impact. So again, the point is you can continue eating all the same things, just make these minor tweaks. And then, now we have about hundreds and you can just keep going through all of them. For each person, we wanted to do a before and after. Over a 3-month period, you did a blood test on them before and after. And it is unbelievable how these small changes, they told us, we've signed up to every program in the past, but we gave up. Okay? Here, 3 months later, not only did all the parameters, the important parameters change, but more importantly, they felt like, okay, this I can do for the rest of my life. And in many ways, that's the goal, right? You should be able to do these things for the rest of your life, otherwise it's not worth it. Okay? You keep going. And so there's just lots, so we just skip this slide. There are lots and lots and lots of examples. And just if you want to check, so what we've done is there's a Glucose Gyan account on Instagram. Check it out. But the other thing is, if you take a picture of that QR code, we have created this sort of a community where all the frequently asked questions, what are some of the common recipes, healthy recipes? A lot of that is there. It's quite interesting because, for example, some of the questions I answered, many questions, there are hundreds of questions. And one of the problems when you go online and you do a search for something, you'll find something that says one thing and then you'll find another video that says the opposite. And you don't know what to believe. And our hope is if you go there, whatever answer you get, you can actually believe, because we provide the scientific validity, why it is true, the data to support it, and so on and so forth. So for those interested, try that out. But that's the talk, and I can open it up for questions.
So I think we can take questions from the 12th floor here, and the rest who are joined us from Zoom can put in their questions in the Q&A section. Here it will take a bit to come.
Yeah.
Please say QR code, you send it separately.
The Q.
Worried about the QR code, sugar should not spike.
Yeah, go ahead, ask anything.
Why is it that the doctors in India do not recommend higher fasting in the test, because it should tell you in advance that you will be diabetic or not?
You know what?
Insulin resistance fasting, they don't put that test ever.
Yeah, so the question is about insulin resistance fasting. Why is it not recommended as much as it should? Because it's a good early indicator for what's to come. And in many ways, that is the issue, that there are, if you ask 10 different doctors, and I'm not even talking about diabetologists. If you talk to 10 different diabetologists, they'll have 10 different opinions. And that in many ways we are right at a place where it's less based on data and more based on individual experience. And so the more we can actually integrate data, and I'll give an example of this. Vikram, who Sunil knows, our common friend, his mother was diabetic, is diabetic. And she was told to have an insulin shot at a certain time of the day. And for many years, that's exactly what she did. Then when we spoke about this program, Vikram got his mother onto this program, and she found that her spike was largest at a different time in the day. So he said, isn't logically the right thing then to take the insulin shot then, rather than at the end of the day? And so he went and spoke to his diabetologist, and he said, oh yeah, you can do that. And as casually as that, the answer was sure. But then his immediate thing was, but then why have we been doing it this way? Because it typically works for most people at that time. And this is back to that comment earlier, right? Because just because it works for one doesn't mean anything about how it will work for the next. And I think as more and more data comes in, I believe a lot of things will start becoming more standard. But today there just isn't enough data. It's all hearsay. It's all, past knowledge. Whether that's right or wrong is not always known.
Most of the time, we get to know that we should spread the meal 4 portions throughout the day. what is the myth and what is the reality? I mean, it's same for applicable for everyone or is it specific?
Yeah. So, there are also people who will swear by intermittent fasting, which says do not spread your meal over 4 times in the day, right? So what do you believe? And the reality is, like, intermittent fasting in general is fine because you're basically reducing the amount of time your body has to do work. Because every time you eat something, your body has to go through a process of digestion, which means the insulin has to get released, all the stuff I told you has to happen. It actually puts a lot of burden on the body to digest food. And so if you can reduce the number of times you do that, in general, better. So with that logic, one can say intermittent fasting makes sense. However, having said that, I know a lot of people, in fact, we have had a lot of people who have joined our program who did intermittent fasting, but when they broke their fast, at 11 o'clock in the morning, they have their first meal. If you start, because right now your body is craving stuff, right? And if at that point you start your meal with carbs, it's worse than not doing intermittent fasting, right? And so the problem is, unless the entire knowledge is known, people, hear bits and pieces because that's all that is spoken about. There'll be a 15-second TikTok video that says intermittent fasting is great, but they'll not say how to break your fast, right? And so, but there are, and I'm sure Sneha can talk to this as well, there are enough good reasons for certain people to actually break it up into 4 meals. Sneha, is there something you want to talk on this topic?
For some, we have seen that if they divide their meals and keep a gap of 6 hours between 2 meals, it works better for them. For some, we have seen that they were doing 2 meals and they were getting large spikes. So it's individualistic how the intermittent fasting works for most, because the carb load that you're able to handle is different for everybody. And after a period of time, it also becomes more different because after dropping the amount of fat in the liver, your insulin starts performing more better. So then again, you're able to handle carb load more better after a specific period of time.
Okay, if I spike 140, 140.
So we divide as 120, but the thing is that's for a non-diabetic person. But as you become pre-diabetic, then you take it to 140 and so on. What's amazing is the number of us who right now in this room are pre-diabetic and don't know it is huge. And that is, and people say, I'm pre-diabetic, I'm not diabetic. As if diabetic is the disease and pre-diabetic is like the early warning signs. The reality is, again, this number 6.5 is the borderline between pre-diabetic and diabetic. There's nothing magical about 6.5. If you're 6.1, you're heading. If the last time you were 5.9 and this time you're 6.1 and next time you're 6.3, you're pre-diabetic. But basically your body is telling you that your whole mechanism is beginning to slowly fail. And what does slowly fail mean? Because effectively your insulin, at some point, because you're constantly getting big glucose spikes, remember your insulin's job is the moment it sees sugar, it goes in and does work. After some time, insulin starts giving up. It says, I can't keep up with you. You're constantly causing spikes. Doesn't matter whether you have 4 meals or 2 meals. Doesn't matter whether you're doing intermittent fasting or not. If you have glucose spikes, your insulin has to get to work. And at some point, insulin gives up. And then you might have heard the term insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is nothing but a fancy way of saying your body has had enough. I don't want to deal with this constant thing. So it just stops doing it. And as it, over time, it becomes worse and worse. Your 6.3 becomes 6.5, becomes 6.7. And then suddenly all of us get worried. But pre-diabetes is as much of a disease as diabetes is.
I haven't. Go.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, at times when we are in the zone of weight losing and then we keep on doing, workout without even understanding when to stop. So how do we understand what is the right amount of workout?
Yeah.
When to stop?
So, so this is actually a very good question. The question is, we often work out, but we don't often know when to stop, right? What's the right thing? And there are 2 parts to it, okay? One is, and this first part is something that I don't think we talk enough about, which is when you do workout, what are you doing? You are actually, putting a lot of stress on your muscles, right? You're trying to stretch your muscles, you're tearing your muscles, so they reform and you get stronger. That to make it stronger, your body requires something. You know what that something is? To repair your muscle, to this thing, protein, right? The recommended amount of protein intake for a person when you're working out is at least 1.5 times your weight. Okay? Which means most of us require nothing less than 100 to 150 grams of protein a day. If you start tracking how much protein you eat, it is nowhere close to that. Okay? If you're vegetarian, it's very hard to get to those levels. So if you're vegetarian and you're working out a lot and you're not eating enough protein, you're actually, damaging your muscle. And so in that case, even a little bit of workout is too much. And we think we're doing something good for ourselves, that I'm working out, I'm building muscle, I'm building more muscle cell, but there is no protein to make that happen. And so that's the first issue, is how much protein are you having? Then I can answer that question, right? You know what I mean? Like that's, and then the second thing is, how many over here wear either a Fitbit or a Apple Watch or one of these Garmin or something like that? I'm assuming quite a few, right? One of the metrics that these devices give is called HRV, heart rate variability. I don't know how many of you ever looked at that carefully, but heart rate variability, the higher the better, which means your body is in good balance. One way to know whether you're working out too much, is if your heart rate variability starts going too low, you're going overboard. Okay, but if you don't have any of these monitors, the simplest way is listen to your body. Our bodies are pretty good at telling us when too much is too much. So there is a scientific part, but there is the instinct part. Here, listen to your body. Food, don't. Exercise, yes. And by the way, one interesting side note. People think there's a thing called atrial fibrillation. A lot of people get an attack of atrial fibrillation. We have seen people doing they put the electric, this thing on your heart. In movies, they show it a lot, right? So that's atrial fibrillation. You can get atrial fibrillation and people die from it. Okay, if you don't exercise enough, or if you exercise too much. And this is typically cardio, right? There are people who might have heard of stories. They're on their bikes, they're running hard, and these people have an atrial fibrillation issue because this can happen on either side. And so, all in all, if your body is saying you're pushing it, it's better to listen to it than to say, no, but I want more willpower. Exercise, yes, you need willpower to start, but not to, unless you're running a marathon, right? But I think most of us, we need more willpower to start. But after that, listen to your body. Yeah.
That you said about the protein thing. I have been into workout and weight loss. Everything that you mentioned has been good. So one thing, being a vegetarian, I lack matching my protein count every day. So now my thought is because you can't eat 100 and 120 grams paneer every day in your meals. But if I split it, I can.
Correct.
So is protein powder, like everybody says, any kind of whey protein or plant-based protein or any kind of protein, is it recommended? Is it good for my body? And second thing is, how do every day keep tracking all these spikes and everything? So it's very hard for us to track. After a point, it's very tough to understand if this is soothing. Okay, understand it. My body is reacting, I understand. Other than that, how do you keep a track of all these things to maintain? And the other part is, the third question is, what I have is, even after trying to maintain the diets and everything, I'm not able to increase the weight change that I'm doing or increase my energy to go a level further.
Yeah. So all amazing questions. I'll try and repeat it because it might not be you might not have heard it. Number one, if you're a vegetarian, it's hard to have 120 grams of protein. You can't have 120 grams of paneer every day. Second question was, how do you keep a track of these glucose spikes? Right? It's an overhead. You don't have time, you have enough work to do, you don't have to keep a track of all of this. And third one was about what?
Able to increase the work.
You can't not able to increase the weight levels even after doing all these things. The weight levels during workout don't go up, right? So let me answer them one by one. The first one is protein powders. That was a question. Are protein powders okay? Protein powders, whey, plant, any of these are okay as supplements. If you're, see, in the ideal world, we should get it from our food. But when we cannot get it from the food and you are going to work out, then it's important to supplement with protein powder, right? And there are, and the only thing I would say when it comes to protein powders, if you look at the nutrition labels, and that's a whole topic in itself, okay? You should look carefully at the nutrition label to see how much added sugar, because a lot of people, a lot of companies, to make their protein powder more interesting and more tasty, they have a lot of added sugars, which destroys the point of having that, right? And so go for the protein powder which has minimal amount of added sugar, right? So that's, I think, the first thing. It's okay as a supplement. If your main thing doesn't give it to you, have it with minimal sugar. Second question was about, I'll answer the third one about how to increase the weight, right? And the better you do at this first point, you will automatically see the reason your weight levels are not increasing when you're working out is because your muscles are actually not developing, because there is not enough protein to help you develop your muscle, right? So have you been working out a lot? Yes. But have it increased your number of muscle cells? No. And so if you do this first part well and you add protein powder, you will find that that next part automatically gets addressed. And then the second question was about tracking, right? How do you track all of this? And what we have done in our programs is do this for 2 weeks. The CGM stays on for 2 weeks. Okay. During those 2 weeks, track all the foods you eat. In fact, experiment. All the stuff you eat, all the stuff you want to eat. Right? Based on the data from these 2 weeks, you know enough. Then don't put it on for the next 1 year. Every 1 year doing it for 2 weeks is not a big overhead. But if you do it all the time, that's massive overhead. Right? And so what we have found is our bodies are also evolving, right? So doing it every year, 2 years is worthwhile. But at one time, do it for 2 weeks, take all that data and use that to make decisions. And that's what, like in our program, that's what we help with. But you can do it yourself for 2 weeks, figure out what works, what doesn't work. And then at the end of the day, I can give you 20, 30 great insights. But the reality is you have to take 2, 3 of those great insights, make them into habits and follow them. And just doing that, like in your case, I would guess if you added the protein powder, right, given everything else you have said, you will, that one habit will dramatically change how you feel on many of the methods. I would bet money on it.
There is a question. How frequently do we need to have test checkups in case of diabetic or pre-diabetic condition? And can we reduce it by having any particular yogas or exercises?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're diabetic, I would say more often, like once every 3 to 6 months is recommended. If you're pre-diabetic, but your last one, this one hasn't changed too much, then every year is okay. But if it is changing at a rapid pace, then do it every 6 months. As far as exercise is concerned, I think yoga, there are, like I gave this talk 10 days back at TCS, and TCS has this massive yoga council for the entire company. And they have, yoga for diabetics, because there are certain asanas that can help, with your thyroid and all of that. But to me, whether it's yoga or it's strength training or it's any of these exercises, just doing exercise, even walking, actually has an impact. There'll be some exercise that might be better, but for most of us who are still trying to figure out a way to start off with something like go for a 10-minute walk after every meal. Okay? It feels like a lot, but over time you'll find that that is one of the best investments you can make for your body. So you can do more, great. If you can do yoga, even better. But if you have to start small, start small.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yeah.
Interestingly, one of the options, for example, it was said that protein I understand, but let's say almond butter. But almond butter typically one would associate it also with fat or high calorie.
Yeah.
So one is to understand what to eat really. Second is, every time things may not be available. So you have to really plan your meals, if that is the case, especially if you're working for 5 days a week. So how does that really happen? I mean, how did you do it, or how are these people doing it? How do we really go about doing it in the day-to-day level?
So, if everybody here were to look at your meals that you've eaten in the last 30 days, there's a good chance there's a certain pattern. You typically eat the same 12, 13 things around over the month, right? If you knew what each of those meals has to be tweaked with, from there on, you are going to continue doing the exact same grocery shopping you were doing, but you're going to add these 7 additional things. And, right now it feels a little bit vague, but when you actually start doing it, you find that you are just, you're already putting stuff into your grocery bag. Now you want to add 7 or 8 or 4 other things, and it just becomes part of your habit. So that's on that. When you start doing it, you find it does not add overhead. In terms of almond butter, right? Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that fats were given a bad name 30 years ago. In fact, for those of you who have a Netflix account, check out, there's a documentary that talks about how sugar was known 45 years back by the sugar lobby to be really bad. And, sort of like the tobacco lobby, right? They also knew. What did they do? They put so much money and they ensured that was never, made public. But the sugar lobby, what they did is they had to find a scapegoat for why health is getting worse. So they just put it on fat. Okay? So ghee, for a long time, ghee was considered a villain. Now ghee is considered a good thing, and it is a good thing. But for a long time, people said, don't eat ghee. It causes heart attack. Even cholesterol, right? Cholesterol, calories, right? I'm going to use calories. How many over here use calories as a way to determine if their meal, if they had too much, if they have more than these calories, their weight will go up. This is what we are trained to do, right? Count your calories. But actually, calories are pretty useless, because I can give you a diet of only 1,000 calories, all carbs and sugar, and I can give you a diet of 2,500 calories a day, and it's well balanced. You will be way better off with the 2,500 calories than 1,000. But many people talk about calories as the way to determine how to manage your day. Similarly, like, another interesting one, 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps has become like synonymous with, so everybody's trying to match their 10,000 steps. But 10,000 steps, as some of you may know, was a marketing gimmick by a Japanese company 40, 50 years back. Okay. Now, over time, they've said, good, of course it's good to walk. But 10,000 steps has no magical significance. Okay. But if you walk the 10,000 steps so that your heart rate gets elevated to a certain level, that's useful. But if I walk 10,000 steps at 2 kilometers an hour, not so useful. And so again, for those people who have Fitbits, or there's this thing called zone minutes. Okay, that zone minutes is how many of the minutes that you walk, your heart rate was at a higher level. That matters. And if you have 22 zone minutes in a day, it doesn't matter whether it was 10,000 steps, 5,000 steps, 2,000 steps, 22 minutes of an elevated heart rate. But that's too complicated to explain. So 10,000 steps is great, right? Marketing wise, easy to remember. But if you have to remember something, that 10 minutes I spoke about, 10 minutes after lunch, 10 minutes after dinner, walk it at a good pace. You don't have to run. Just walk so your heart rate goes up. You're doing a lot more for yourself than trying to worry about 10,000 steps.
I read somewhere that lack of sleep leads to weight gain. How does that work?
Yeah, so sleep is one of those not as well understood. We know generally you should sleep well, or you should sleep a reasonable amount. But I'll tell you, for each person, the amount of sleep is different. That's the ideal sleep, right? And so when you don't sleep well, your body does not do a very good job of processing the glucose. So you will, even for foods that you typically won't have a spike, when you don't sleep well, you'll have a spike. Yeah? Because again, your body gets dysregulated. And once your body gets dysregulated, it does not behave the way it's supposed to. So you will find that the days you don't sleep well, there's a higher chance you also feel indigestion. Okay? Because once, like I said, once your body gets dysregulated, lots of things go wrong. And then if it goes back to sugar spikes, then you know how the sugar spikes impact. So all roads lead to.
So, sir, linking to the same thing, is there any way out to get a good sleep? At times we try, but we do not get.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, and we don't know
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, there are some easy things, right? I'll give some easy tips. Number one, try and keep at least 2.5 to 3 hours between finishing your dinner and going to sleep. Okay. In that 2.5 to 3 hours, please find 10 minutes to walk. Okay. Try not to have a big dessert. Right? Have a dessert. I mean, if that's what you like, have it. Don't go overboard. Because remember, I said too much of a spike, this thing, right? You try to, if you want to have alcohol, have it preferably at lunchtime, not at dinner time. Okay? Because again, alcohol causes.
Please don't look at me.
It's only happening on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or again, if you're having an early enough dinner, okay, sure. But the problem is all these things cause poor sleep. So again, I keep going back to, we have so much data on this. So anybody with a Fitbit, Apple Watch, there is on your thing, it shows you the amount of deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, and awake time, right? You will find, just do this, it's an easy experiment, right? Do all these different things and see how they impact. Like reduce the amount of time between dinner and bed and increase the amount of time. And do it not for one day, do it for a week and see what happens to your REM sleep and deep sleep. There are different stages of sleep, right? Ideally you want like 15, or let's say 20% of REM sleep. 20% of your night should be in REM sleep mode. 15 to 20% should be in deep sleep. 60% should be in light sleep. That's a good balance. And you'll find if all those things that I said you don't do, right, you will find that drops dramatically. So it is actually easy to manage sleep. But I mean, the explanation is easy. To actually do it.
There's another question. Your views on efficiency of freestyle liber versus glucometer and your views on type 1 diabetes.
So Freestyle Libre is this Abbott sensor. It gives you continuous data. So every minute, it's measuring your blood sugar. And since we want to look at your behavior of the blood sugar, that to me is way more valuable than a glucometer, which you'll have to keep pricking. Not fun. And every time you prick, you get one data point. So absolutely Freestyle Libre or any, I don't want to pitch Abbott, right? Anybody who makes a good continuous glucose monitor is useful. Continuous glucose monitors will not be as accurate as a glucometer because glucometer is directly measuring your blood. This is measuring your interstitial fluid. But the absolute reading doesn't matter as much as the trend, right? That is what you're trying to do. So each has their pros and cons. But for a 2-week period, I would absolutely use a CGM. For a longer period, when I want to do random checks, I would use a glucometer. And then the second question was about type 1 diabetes, right? Type 1 diabetes you're born with, or you might develop later in life, but it's a condition that is not a lifestyle disease typically. It is something with your body that's just malfunctioning badly. People with type 1 diabetes, it's a hard life because they have to keep taking insulin shot because their body does not produce insulin. So all the stuff I spoke about, your insulin kicks in, does this, does that. For people with type 1 diabetes, there is no insulin getting produced. So you have to keep injecting yourself with insulin. And now technology has gotten to the point where I know a couple of our participants, they actually in the US, they have a CGM and an insulin pump. They're both tiny, right next to each other on the arm. And the CGM measures the glucose level and it sends a message to the via Bluetooth to the insulin pump and it pumps. So throughout the day, it's microdosing you on insulin. Versus today, once a day you get this big insulin shot, or twice a day you get an insulin shot. But that's not necessarily the most efficient, right? You should give the insulin when your body needs it. So this is constantly tracking. So for those people, their CGM is on throughout the year, because otherwise there's no way for them to manage their thing. So type 1 diabetes is a whole different thing. Of course, everything we spoke about still applies, but that in itself is not enough. They have to do much more serious things. But having said that, most of our country today has type 2 diabetes, which is a lifestyle disease, which none of us are typically born with, but we abuse our body enough without knowing very often. And then we run into this issue. And that's why they say in the US, 88% of the population of the US is metabolically unhealthy. Means they either have an LDL issue, a triglyceride issue, a cholesterol issue. Only 12% of the population has everything in the green. And in India, I have to believe, if India is the heart disease capital of the world, it's probably at least as bad.
Since you have a lot of data, doctor, is there a lot of times we hear this that after a certain age, metabolism drops.
Yeah.
Especially in women, we get to hear that after kids it drops, and it's very difficult. Then, whatever we are seeing and what we heard today, that also has to drastically change to that extent, because while I would like to have, with whatever options are there, I still need to have a very balanced diet. Otherwise, I'm not going to burn that much fat, right? So is there a correlation? And if it is, then how do I balance it out?
Yeah, and so, one of the things why we recommend putting on the CGM every couple of years, every year if possible, at least a couple of years, because our bodies are changing. And what worked for us 3 years back might not work for us today. And so doing these checks just to see, what we need to tweak, because it's not like suddenly there's a massive change. But if we don't make these small changes throughout, and we check after 5-10 years, there is a massive change. But the problem is, once there's a massive change, your body is also become that much more dysregulated. And then to undo it is that much harder. So it's better well before our metabolism slows down, we can make these changes. And the other thing I'll say is a lot of exercise. And I don't mean lots of exercise. Exercise plays a larger role than we give credit for. Right? Food does. If food is a big issue, but so is exercise. And if all of us could incorporate a small amount of exercise of any kind, whatever is sustainable for each of us, it actually really does a good job of balancing our metabolism. And so my conclusion has been so far, we hear extreme things often, but you don't have to do extreme things to remain healthy. You can do these small things. You just have to understand your body and then accordingly tweak.
So I have a question regarding the pre-workout. There's some kind of supplements also available in market. Is it something essential, or it's like we can replace it, or suppose if we are like doing the morning, and while in the morning if you are like starving, and if you go and do a workout, so it will use burn the fats which are there. So is it? So my question is, either we should go for a pre-workout supplement. If yes, then what kind of thing is available in vegetarian things available, and which will help us to have a good workout. That's one part of it. And second is, essentially it's supposed to be there or not? Like, is it mandatory to have a pre-workout meal or not?
Yeah. I'm sure Sneha will have an answer as well. I'll tell you my input. There are two different things that you're talking about, okay? And both are important. One is you want to use as a source of energy. You're looking for ways to have more energy while doing the workout, right? And that, you don't have, if you had a meal about an hour or so before that, great. But the other thing is to repair the muscle. That you require protein, and for that you require food. So there is food for the sugar and the carbs, and there's food for the protein, right? And the recommendation typically is that 1 hour before or 1 hour after, have a protein supplement. But as always, if you can get it naturally, always better. If you're not getting, and this is the point we're discussing, if you do not get enough of a natural source of protein, then supplement, but make sure it's something which has not got too much sugar.
Actually, when we go to gym, we see people like, they are having pre-supplement as well as the post. So we are like confused. Both are like proteins only, right? I mean, what's different that which is having, in a pre-workout and both?
Yeah, unless,
Like, is it something kind of a marketing strategy that's just
Also.
That's what I am thinking.
Yeah.
The genuine thing is
Yeah.
something
we
have just a marketing.
So, if we look at the role of supplement, let's take it as a supplement. If we are able to manage it with food, we don't require a supplement. We require food to be there before workout for two reasons. One, to power your workout. Second is reduce the amount of catabolism or breakdown that is happening and help your recovery. Now, if you can manage with the food, you don't need a supplement there. That's the answer.
But I think also the pre versus post, like, should you have a meal before and like a supplement before and a supplement after, or one side is enough?
Both can be food or both can be supplement depending on your convenience and how you are able to. So if you're having a very early morning workout and you don't have time for a meal, it's a 5 o'clock workout, then a supplement is helpful. You can't sit and eat 1 hour before because you have to go for a workout. But if you have time, you can have an egg sandwich or nuts with fruit. These could be or something that you can have early, say half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour before the meal. That should still be.
Told us something to eat. That is what he wanted to have. Some 1 or 2 things that he'll eat. Say the afterward. To the sorry, thanks.
There are some questions. What are the good application which will support CGM sensors?
Good application. And I'm not sure I understand the question.
So converting the
Converting
continuous
that,
monitoring
into the app.
into an app.
Oh, so the Abbott comes with its own app. But like if in our programs, our app does the same thing. But in our app, it reads from the sensor and directly correlates the food. Because an Abbott will only show you the data, but it has nothing, it has no knowledge about your food. But there are others as well. There is a company called Ultra Human, there's a company called Sugar Fit. There are others as well. Each has their own app. So yeah, there are quite a few apps in the market. But the thing that I've found is most of us are not nutrition experts. So many of these apps, they'll give you the app, they'll give you the sensor, then you make sense of the data. But most of us don't know how to make sense of the data. Okay, what do I do? Okay, you told me this caused an issue. Now what? Right? And that's why what we decided in our program, we wanted to include nutritionists. So people like Sneha are part of the program. There's a Zoom call. They explain the data to you to make so that you can understand, okay, this caused this, but now maybe you can, like the example that Sneha gave right now, right? Maybe add a couple of nuts before this, or do this. Then there's a solution rather than here's a problem, now figure out the solution.
Any specific food habits recommended for thyroid problem?
I think maybe Sneha can answer that.
That's way. That's
Very
different. Yeah.
Most of the time it is hypothyroidism, where you supplement thyroid medications and such. The only thing to remember is don't let the high nitrogen foods to interfere with it, which are typically soya or that come from cauliflower cabbage family. Now, when they are cooked well, they would not trouble you. Just thing to remember is space them away from your medication time, because the hormone or the medication that is taken will get impacted if it immediately comes near the these nitrogen providing foods.
So what I'm surprised, Nikhil, is that all these years I've been doing this annual health checkup, but never anyone, rather last while period of my ICSM and ASK's annual health checkup, corporate health checkup, never done this calcification test. Is it a blood test?
No.
What is
it's
that?
almost like it's a CT scan.
CT scan. Okay.
Yeah, it goes. See, in some sense, your blood tests are a proxy for what's happening in your heart.
Yeah.
This goes straight, looks at your heart, and looks at the arteries and sees how much calcification there is.
Okay.
Now it's I don't know what the cost in India is, but it's not a cheap test.
Yeah.
And so cardiologists will typically not recommend it unless they think there's an issue. But it's impossible to tell if there's an issue.
Too late to.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. But I think the one thing that
You can't yourself.
you can go. If you're willing to pay for it, in India, you can do anything. So, but I think the one thing that I think is always very valuable is, I don't know, if you have to do an annual checkup as part of ASK, you should take all the annual checkup, whoever is willing to get it, this thing, right, and review all of them, because especially the trend data, right? If you've been doing it every year, you probably know how your triglycerides have evolved, how your cholesterol has evolved, and have somebody actually review the data so that they can say, in your case, maybe you should go get a calcium CT scan. Because there are because today who does the blood test? It's a lab. And the lab has no interest beyond they're not going to treat you. So they give you the result, they're underlying certain things, and then it's up to you. Your doctor typically doesn't have the time, right? If they see one thing underlying, they'll say, eat better. Or because they don't have time, they would like to, but I don't think they can. So then who is the onus on to figure out what to do about your blood reports every year? And I've seen this happen too often. Because the onus is on us and we don't know enough. If something is not underlined, we do not take it seriously. But if that trend was moving up, you don't have to wait for it to go above 200. You could have a massive event. Like I said, 80% of people who had a heart attack did not have any issues on their blood report, right? So it is the trend of the movement. And so for me, if there's one thing that as a corporate, anybody can do is have this counseling service on who should, go in and get a scan or whatever.
Since you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that you don't take tea or coffee, there is a question on coffee. What is your take on coffee? As every few years we keep hearing it about good or bad, and person is also wanting to know, is brewed coffee better than instant coffee?
Since I don't have coffee, I will leave this. Yeah.
Up to 2 to 3 cups a day is okay to have. Brewed versus instant, difficult. Even I need to study. Depending on taste is what is picked up. But if we look brewed, it will become more stronger as compared to the instant one. That's definitely will bring in more caffeine.
I think when it comes to coffee, brewed versus instant, I don't think we ever want to give an answer unless we have enough data, and we don't have enough data. So tough to answer that one. But coffee, yes, it's true. There's every couple of years is a new fad. Okay, don't have coffee, have a lot of coffee. But I think a lot of the logic that applies to dark chocolate, right, actually applies to coffee, right? And the higher the percentage of that cocoa, right, the better. So 75% versus 72% versus 70%. On the dark chocolate label, they actually put that. Take a look. The higher the percentage, the better.
But right? many times these are all look like the fad. I was in the US summer. So Starbucks has got some say, oh, coffee, okay. Correction. This is a pumpkin latte. Pumpkin latte. No, pumpkin latte is so important. I came to India and said, we have pumpkin latte. Yeah, we have pumpkin latte. Pumpkin latte is in India as well. What is pumpkin latte with India? People are so the fact here is that I think this all looks to me.
Yeah.
Little
so this actually brings up a very important point. If there's one skill you need to all build, is how to read a nutrition label. Because anytime you go to the grocery store, especially packaged food, there's a nutrition label. And it is one of the greatest marketing gimmicks I've ever seen. Because these companies are forced to put a nutrition label. Many of them would prefer never to put it because, how do you make anything tasty? Add sugar, right? I was joking to somebody the other day. I went to Shiv Sagar to have lunch, my father and we ordered American chop suey because for old time's sake. Because when I went to the US, I realized American chop suey is neither American nor Chinese. But when I asked for it, they were looked at me like blank, and I'm like, how do you not have American chop suey? I'm in a Chinese restaurant in America, and they'd never heard of it. It's a very Indian thing. Okay? So I ordered American chop suey, cheese macaroni, and a butterscotch sundae. Okay. The least sweet thing was the butterscotch sundae. Okay. American chocolate was like that poured syrup. Okay. And the cheese macaroni, they've done the same thing. Bottom line is, for all foods, one way to make it tasty, add sugar. Because you can't go wrong, right? In terms of taste. But when they do the nutrition labels, they will put, carb, number of grams of carb, grams of fat, grams of protein, added sugars. They've been forced to do it. But how do they manage to still find a way to get around the system? They'll say one serving contains this. But then you have to read what is the definition of one serving. Okay, one serving, and sometimes they'll say one biscuit. You never eat one biscuit. But you look at the ingredients based on the amount of, assuming a certain amount of servings, right? So that's one. Second, sugar. Right? We now all know, right? You have to avoid sugar. There are, I don't know how many, 40 or 60, some 60 names for sugars, which you will never have heard of. They all mean sugar, but the only one you will see as sugar is sugar. And now some of us have become more aware, so we say, oh, sucrose is also sugar, and fructose is also sugar, right? But there are another 40 names for sugar. Maltodextrin, right? What is that one? Maltodextrin, right? That's also sugar. And there are more and more creative names for sugar. They're giving the chemical names, right? And we think, acha, there's only so much sugar. Everything else is maltodextrin and all the other things. Sugar. So, and there's a thing that unless the sugar is more than 0.5 grams or something, they don't report it. So they put a lot of 0.49 grams or lots of sugar, right? And so we think it's organic, healthy food. But if you ever looked at it, for example, Complan, Bonvita, we tell our kids, right? No Coke. Have Complan, Bonvita. Complan, Bonvita is as bad as Coke. You look at what it does to the sugar, to their glucose spikes. Huge. So, but look at the marketing, right? I hope there's no one Complan or Bonvita on this call, but
no, but you said so much about marketing. The marketing team probably is very upset.
Oh, they are taking creative tips.
It is. So, any more questions? Or 6 o'clock.
Sugar and jaggery powder, if we consume more of jaggery powder.
Same calories.
No debate. Both are equally
Jaggery
good.
powder is another name of sugar.
Yeah, was there one more?
Yelena is 1:15 now.
So I think that's the end. I hope it was not boring. I hope it was entertaining and you learned something that you can go back with.
It was very good.
Thank you.
So thank you, Doctor, for taking the time out. And I think it was a very eye-opening session. Needless to say, a lot of takeaways, and for us to think about what we do with it is something still going to be left up to us, of course, and how we take it forward. But thank you so much for breaking our myths and making us think on a different path, at least triggering that thought, I would say. And hopefully we will Google a lot of things. There's a lot of things available on the YouTube, like he and I were discussing.
Reach out to his company's website and whoever wanted to look at it.
Yeah, that's we have given the details. But I think importantly, I think it's very important to filter out the data and not rely on what we see on the internet. I think that's where really things are getting more complicated as we are growing more technologically savvy, if I can say so.
What's the other point I just wanted to just mention? Everybody whoever is here physically and whoever is on the Zoom call, only one suggestion. Whatever you heard today, act tomorrow. If you do not act tomorrow, day after has no meaning. Because this is all about discipline and putting an action into whatever little step we'll take. The big step is required. Whether you start counting your proteins, you start counting your carbohydrates, fiber or fat or whatever it may be. Give your left and right brains some energy to think what you heard today. If you feel it's relevant, it's not relevant, it doesn't matter whether tomorrow or never. But acting tomorrow, acting today is the most important thing to my mind. Otherwise, these lectures are very interesting takeaways. they become a nice party talk. They are nice evening to just show that you are evolved and arrived, and you can use some big words. It's not about world at large. It is all about me, myself. And everybody carries a lot of good things. At the same time, everybody carries some of the genetical things, which there is a disadvantage, correct? And we all know that's a fact. So hence it is important not to be, it has increased our awareness, but the takeaway to me is act now.
So, as a token of our appreciation, Sunil, we would like you to thank Dr.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. He's flying out to US tonight. So we just requested why not to spend some time with all of us here. And he's agreed. And I really thank Nikhil and Sneha to be here and really spend time and really created lots of curiosity. And I think followed by action amongst, at least second time I heard, and I am quite deep into it. More you listen, every day new learning. Thank you.
So we have certain things for you and your team as well, very supportive team. So Sunil, our ASK signature books.
Sure. I think these are something which we create quite meticulously in ASK. So I think, I'm sure I know it's a wait for you, but you should actually.
So one for your US office and one for the Pune office. We've got two sets.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
And that is for you and the team, the box.
Wow.
Thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you so much.
for taking the time out.
Yeah. Sure. I know he's going to US, so
That's okay. His team is here, so
Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
Yeah.